And as you know, throughout this series this year, we've been really fortunate to have many fantastic guests join us. And today is no exception. I'm really pleased to welcome Michele Cadario. Michele is a past advisor to Canadian prime ministers and BC premiers and is today a consultant, a board director, and a day trader. We'll hear a bit more about that later, who's keenly focused on tech. We're thrilled to have her join us today. Please join me in welcoming Michele.
Hi.
Hi, Michele. Thanks again for joining us. We're really grateful to have you with us today. Now, a reminder to the audience, ask your questions at any time. We're really interested to hear from you. We love these sessions to be as interactive as possible. But let's get started. So, Michele, can you tell us a little bit more about your career, the origin story, your background, and how that builds to where you are today?
Sure. Well, a lot of it is about politics, which will come as no surprise to even the short bio. I got involved when I was in high school, and that followed through to university. At the time, there was a leadership race going on, and I got involved with Paul Martin's leadership campaign and became a national youth organizer back in 1990. So I'm dating myself right off the top. Following that loss, I went in and started working for him as an opposition member, went to his office as finance minister. And after about 4 years there and putting forward a balanced budget, I thought I would see if I could make it in the real world and get a real job. Went out to Alberta and worked for an energy company for about 4 years. And then I came back to put together his leadership bid that we were successful. I was his national director. And after winning that, I was the campaign director in 2003. 2004. And then when we won that, I went into his office as deputy chief of staff. The people of Canada had a different career path for me in 2006. And so I guess with my tail between my legs, I came out to BC. Once out there, I played volleyball on the beach for about 6 months. Got in terrific shape, and then it started to rain. And that first winter, I thought, oh boy, I got to go get a job. And working from home, doing some consulting, I just needed to get out. So I got connected with Canuck Place Children's Hospice, a nonprofit who wanted to build a new hospice out in the valley. And they needed somebody to lead that project and to lead their fundraising. So I did. I led their capital campaign. And then, 4 years later, a good friend of mine decided that she was going to run for premier and got back involved with Christie's campaign. And we found ourselves $4 million in debt. And so my new fundraising skills, I put them to use for the party. And then, was the deputy campaign manager for our 2013 election. Again, I thought I was done, but no, she wanted me to come into the premier's office. So I did that for 4 years. And then after, as I would like to say, we did win that election in 2017, but we didn't have enough seats to hold it. So when we lost government and the people of BC spoke, I went back into retirement from politics and started my consulting business again, and really focusing on working with companies who were smaller and wanting to grow, who were looking to figure out how to get access to some financing and to how to position themselves to be able to kind of take it to the next stage, and then kind of going from there, and certainly getting involved in the markets without question.
So interesting. I have career envy now. It sounds like you adrenaline and cortisol have powered your, your entire working life. Looking back, that was a pretty big deal, right? To be the first woman in Canada to run a national campaign, to be the campaign director for the Liberal Party. So can you tell us a little bit about that? Because I think there is something in that story to perhaps inspire other women to reach further and faster.
Well, looking back, I can say with pride that it was a big deal. But I must admit, I didn't really understand the glass ceiling that I was breaking through at the time. And I didn't appreciate, and this is probably one of the biggest lessons I've learned, right? I didn't appreciate just what it might mean to other women who might be looking to try and do that, continue with that path. And it was amazing, right? Like it was the most stressful time of my life without question. And it could be isolating. I will say that as well, because I was in a very male environment, a lot great people, some of my best friends to this day. But sometimes when you're not one of the boys to go out and have a scotch after work, and it can be a little different. And there's also, I did feel the pressure. A lot of it was also being so young, doing it, that I needed to set an example. And that was a big thing with me, whether that was, actual or just kind of something self-imposed, that I needed to, because I knew that people were kind of feeding off of me in terms of, when you come into the office in the middle of a campaign that's really close, everyone is looking at, what's the mood of the senior people, right? Because that kind of tells you what the overnight numbers might have said. And so there was a lot of stress just to be that stable kind of person who radiated some kind of a confidence, but tried to still get people to instill the work. And so there wasn't a lot of outlets for that. And or that I would accept, and that maybe I didn't recognize what outlets that there were. And so, I think that, if I was to look back and try and do it again, and had to do it again, it was a time before social media, but I would have tried to show and set that example and let more women know what that path was at that point. And so I'm kind of trying to make up for that 20 years later, 15 years later.
That's awesome. So yeah, reflecting on where we are today and where we were, 15 years ago, where would you say we are on diversity, gender diversity, but diversity more generally? Are we there yet?
No, I truly do not believe so. And I was talking to, kind of texting back and forth with someone who was a deputy chief of staff to Obama, and she said something really profound to me. And she was talking about, it's not good enough that if you're a white woman or a woman to get through the door, if you don't bring people behind it with you, right? That you're just, if you get through the door and then you're just enabling status quo, you're not making the difference that you need to make, and that there's a responsibility. And I think that I feel that more now than ever. What I'll say is, the 2004 on the liberal side, I was the first woman to run it, and we didn't win another election until another woman ran it in 2015, and that was Katie Telford. So I'll put that there. And my business partner, who is on one of my projects, is Jenny Byrne, who was the first woman to run a conservative campaign and win for Stephen Harper. Fortunately, we were on the other side of that, but we kind of keep going with it. She and I actually have a company now that we're trying to put more women on corporate boards and try and put more women in C-suite positions and really raise the profile and raise the opportunities using our networks across the country to try and kind of break through in more cases.
That's excellent. And I really appreciate you sharing that. I think sometimes when we think about politics or the political world, we think about what divides us and what causes us to be different. And I love the idea that you guys are now business partners and you've come together on something that unites you, even although there's so much in which you may differ. So I think that's quite an inspirational story. And I have to say, I have not been texting with the deputy chief of staff under Obama at any point. So I'm quite envious of that. But I love what you're saying there around, it's not enough to break through yourself and then allow the status quo to continue, right? The status quo is just one of many, many options available to us. And if you're absolutely in love with it and you think it can't be improved, well, good for you. But for the rest of us, we see opportunities for improvement, and we're going to keep pushing for change, because every step forward makes us all stronger. Now, listen, let's keep going on diversity, because I know that it's something that you spend a lot of time on. In fact, you've built a business around it. Tell us a bit about the work you've been doing on gender diversity in Canadian boards, public boards. I'm really interested to hear about what you're doing and what success you've had, or what learnings you've had.
Well, so we started up just before the pandemic. Kind of, we launched in February, and then kind of the world shut down in that March. And so we had intended, and this is something we want to pick up again, is to get out there much more in terms of a speaker series, and get out and talk to young women, especially, and getting into the universities and really kind of encouraging them on the path. It's very much like what both Jenny and I went through, trying to recruit women to run for politics. It does generally take longer. There are more questions. There are more concerns about whether you have the qualifications. And I find that same thing to be true with respect to board recruitment. Women want to know a lot more. They want to know what the time commitment is. My experience is I never had that problem with it. If a man wanted to run for election, they were lined up saying, pick me, pick me, pick me. But for women, you really had to go out and recruit and try and assure them that they had the skills, they had the qualifications that any other person that were putting themselves forward did, and they just had to stand up for themselves. And so a lot of that, of what Jenny and I are trying to do, is coach in that way. And at the same time, there's a public policy angle to this too, because Canada isn't doing so hot in terms of board diversity or C-suite diversity. When 24% of the companies on the TSX still have 0 women on their boards. And I think there was a stat about 40, don't quote me on this one, but about 40% of C-suites don't have one woman on their in their leadership team. There's something wrong with that. And what we've seen around the world is, whether it's Germany or it's England, Australia's ahead of us, California, some of them are bringing in actual legislation that insists on diversity, and that, especially for public companies, that if you want to be listed, then you have to bring some diversity in. And so what we're trying to say here in Canada is, we're trying to push, do this before you're made to do it, right? There are, you just have to think, you just have to want to do it. You have to take that step. And if not, then any politician or group that wanted to put it forward, I think we'll be supporting. I will certainly be supporting.
That's so interesting. Those statistics, 24% of companies on the TSX don't have a woman on their board. Did I hear you correctly?
That's exactly right. And it's the incremental progress is like less than 1% a year. And I think that it's something like only 32% of all board seats are women overall, right? There are some companies that actually have gone to 50-50. I think there was, in the last thing I saw, there was 6 on the TSX out of 640 that had gone to at least 50-50. But what you don't see, and this is something that we're pushing for as well, is trying to get that transparency so that you actually have a list of to name and shame. Let me, as a consumer, someone who has some money to spend, I want to know what companies have women on their boards, and what companies have decided, for whatever reason, that diversity doesn't matter, right? And that might impact my spending dollars, and it might impact a lot of people's spending dollars. And so if you have no shame in terms of not having a diverse board, what do you got to lose? Why not be listed? And so that's something that we're certainly going to keep pushing.
That's fantastic. And as you and I have talked about this before, I mean, gender is the focus in your answer there and in the stats that you're quoting there. But gender is by no means the only or the most important lens through which to think about diversity. How do you engage with other forms of diversity, or the intersectionality of different kinds of diversity? How does that impact your work?
Well, it's really important to us, especially as two white women, that any slate of candidates that we put forward to a board to consider is diverse. It must be more than just white women. Like, that is very important to us. And so we're building different partnerships and coalitions with different executive groups and entrepreneurial groups of people of color. So that's certainly very important. And it's also really important that as we do more reach out, that we're actually encouraging people to step up and to think themselves more than qualified, just to have that kind of confidence, no matter your background. And so that's something that's we're very much top of mind for us.
Yeah, that's great. And I know that there's plenty of people on the call today who'll be really interested in learning more from you about that how, right? Because even if it's not a public board that they're focused on, even if it's just their C-suite or their advisors, or how can I make sure that I've got a diverse lens as I'm promoting people through my organization, I think that messaging that you're giving us, that it isn't enough to just put out the post and expect that diverse candidates will apply. There is a need to reach into the communities that you'd like to see more represented, and encourage them and build the confidence that they have exactly what it takes to be at the table.
That's right. And it's not just diversity for diversity's sake. Like, that's my point on this is, you're a better company and you are going to make more money. You are going to sell more widgets. You are going to be more consumer friendly and reach out to a broader audience if you have a diverse group of people around the table in terms of your governance. Like, it's just good business. Goldman Sachs did a study, I think 2 years ago, where they looked at all the recent IPOs and how they all did afterwards. And the ones that had diverse boards and diverse C-suites far outperformed those that didn't. And you're certainly starting to see institutional lenders look at any kind of prospectus or shareholder resolutions and looking for diversity and starting to use their dollars like that. I wouldn't be surprised if governments started to look at that as well, that in terms of grants that they gave out or any kind of procurement that they did, my suggestion to them when they asked is, yeah, absolutely look at that, because, it should matter to it's got to matter with dollars for real change to be impacted and move. And I think that that's the way to go about this, to make it a complete business transaction.
Yeah, it really is. I'm passionate about helping companies to grow and scale, and you will not grow and scale and realize your business potential if you don't have diverse teams. So one of the things we're hoping to do at BC Tech is start to capture some of the data on our members at a sort of anonymized and aggregated level, because I really believe in the path that you're sharing. The first step is measurement. The second step is visibility and transparency. And then we can start to say, are we satisfied with where we are? And if not,
exactly,
pathways to somewhere better. So listen, please do, just another shout out to my audience. Please do raise your questions in the chat. No question is too terrifying for Michele. So feel free to ask whatever you like. Now, I want to talk a bit more about another angle to your career today, because you've told me that you do a bit of investing in tech companies. And tell me a little bit about that. What caused you to be interested in the tech sector as an investor? What appeals to you? What kind of companies are you drawn to when you start to think about doing that?
Yeah, no, I guess being somewhat of a disruptor myself, I like disruptive technology, and so I was interested in that quote that your VP Future talked about, is that if you're looking at today, then you're already behind, kind of thing. And I just think that there's so many interesting companies out there that are shaking things up and looking at doing things in a different way. There's no question the pandemic was an enormous catalyst for a lot of companies to look at how to change and what to offer and how to make things a little bit different. And that kind of thing interests me. And so I've been, I've been doing a fair bit of trading on in the growth sector, and and also doing some longer term investments in companies that I really believe in, that that are going to shake things up for tomorrow. I think that it's maybe it's the adrenaline rush that it's a little bit of the whole kind of win-lose on a campaign. It's the same kind of thing as the markets, but there's something in there that really appeals to me.
That's awesome. Now, it's interesting because although we've had a lot of dialogues with different people in the community over the last year, I think you're the first woman that has been talking about being an investor. And I'm really interested in that because you're a private investor rather than a
Yep.
venture capitalist or an angel investor. So do you think enough women are active on investing, seeing themselves and their dollars as valuable, not just for consumers, but actually as an investor?
Well, I can only really go from my own kind of social circles, and certainly as I've kind of switched a lot of my emphasis and what I'm doing, that a lot of my girlfriends are very interested in that. They have, some disposable income, and that's the thing. You have to be willing and understand that you could lose whatever money you're putting in, right? Like you have to go in knowing that. And so, we've started some little informal investors clubs with some of my girlfriends and that. And partly, it can be intimidating. And I'm not to say that I wasn't intimidated too, kind of getting my head into it. But I happen to have some opportunities to kind of be brought along and to learn from a few people. And so, I don't give investment advice, and I have no certification to suggest that I should. I certainly talk to people and anyone who's really interested in that about some of the things that I do to prepare myself, what I consider some due diligence, how I think about companies that I'm interested in, and ideally, I'd love to see more women getting involved in the markets.
Me too. It's something that I think we could maybe do more work on that in the coming year. So I'll be excited to think about that. So I'm just noticing I've got a great question in the chat. So Whitney's saying, how would you define leadership? And you come from such an interesting perspective, Michele. You've seen leaders of so many different kinds and shapes and sizes and genders and colors and political parties. How do you today define leadership?
For me, one of the things that I learned from first working with then Finance Minister Paul Martin was when we went into, we first came in, they have all the political people on one side of the room, they have all the public servants on the other side of the room. At that point, they were all white, they were all male, they all had comb overs. That was kind of, and we had actually a very mixed office in terms of diversity, certainly in terms of male-female diversity. And what I learned there from Paul was that smartest person in the room isn't always the person who's talking all the time. It's the person who's listening and asking those questions to elicit more responses. And so to me, what a great leader is someone who can bring out the best in the people around them, who knows how to build a team, and who has a team that wants to be there and wants to give it their best, and who wants to bring forward the ideas. And then as a leader, to run with the great ideas, to do a little bit more due diligence maybe on some others. And when to say, not this time, not no, but not be discouraging in terms of how you might reject an idea. And so I think that coaching, mentoring, quality, and just the motivational is everything that's needed in leadership.
That's really great. Thank you. Mark has another question in the chat. And this is an interesting one. So Mark's asking, from your perspective, what do the worlds of politics and tech have in common?
Well, I think that so many people enter politics wanting to change the world, right? you see a problem and you want to fix it, whether it's child poverty, or it's a tax system that's out of control, or it's trade or whatever. Generally, people are entering politics because they want to make change. And I see the same thing in the tech community, right? Generally, you come up with an idea that is going to that will bring about change in terms of either how people do things or what people do, or what people want to do, right? Like giving them a motivation to do something different. And so that's where I really see the intersectionality of that. It's about the shakeup. Now, there's no question that government moves at a very slow pace. It's and it can be you can get so frustrated about all this massive change that you want to bring in, and then the reality kind of comes crushing in. And so you're a lot more agile, certainly when you're in the private sector. But that desire, that running desire, I think is very common.
That's a great answer. Thank you. So Agnes is asking, what are you most excited about, and what are your biggest concerns about how the future of work is shaping up post-pandemic? So everything's being disrupted. Now we're starting to think about what comes next. What are you excited about? What are you concerned about?
Well, one of the things I'm excited about for sure is that I think that the concept of a 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, it has really been shaken up, right? I think that a lot of companies are going to come back with much more flexible work schedules. I think that is a way that could be far more inclusive for women, especially for moms. I think that it will be actually really good in terms of retention of employees. I'm worried, though, that there may be that might be isolating for people, and that sense of team and that kind of common sense of purpose, and that kind of inconsequential brush at the so-called water cooler that spurs a great idea kind of thing, that kind of interaction, it would be hard to replicate if people are in the office, 1 or 2 days a week, or it's staggered or something like that. And so, I think that it can be overcome, and I'm sure that there will be ways for it to be overcome. But, I just think that the days of having to for all those people who have to commute, and I can't even imagine, I've never had to do that, but you spend an hour a day back and forth, that to reclaim that time either for family or to put into your own business, I think is going to be quite a change. I think that for employers, the demands from employees is going to be very different. The expectations are going to be very different about having, a bit more flexibility, about videoing in if you need to, and that. And so I think it's going to be a test of leadership as we kind of go forward. But I see far more upsides coming out of it than I can see downsides.
Yeah, it's I would echo that. As you know, I'm an endless disruptor as well, and perennially dissatisfied with the status quo. So I like the idea that we're shaking everything up and we're having to start again with a blank sheet of paper and really reflect on what we've learned and what we know. We used to think that the office was where you went to be productive, and now we understand it's where you go to be creative, where you go to collaborate with people. And that'll have implications about how offices are designed and how teams work together. And I'm pretty excited about that. So great. One more call out to the audience. Don't hesitate to raise your questions in the chat. I've got a couple more myself, but then I'll come back to the chat in a moment and see if I've got any other questions. So Michele, I wanted to go back to, you had these big jobs and these big roles early in your career. So if you can reflect back to what it was like at the very beginning of your career, and what words of advice would you give your 20-year-old self to encourage her on the journey she's about to embark on?
Well, I think that I would certainly say to try and live in the moment more, and to appreciate things as they were coming. I was always looking forward to what was I going to do next? What was my role going to be next? What was the next campaign going to look like? What was the next thing that we had to do in government, what was next, and never really taking the time to think back of what is now, like, how do I appreciate this much more now? I think that one of the things I've done well is to try and be a mentor and a coach along the way, and to bring people through, and to give people opportunities. And my approach as a boss was always, just be upfront with me. If you want to go after another job, I'm going to be your advocate. Don't ever think that you have to hold back, or that I'll be upset that you want to move on, or you think there's another opportunity out there. I am going to be your advocate, and don't want you to leave, but I will always be there for you in your corner. And I'm proud of myself for having done that. And the other thing I wish I'd done is journal. I didn't, and I've forgotten half the things, and people, it's terrible. So I wish I had actually journaled all along the way.
I think it's a great point, because we all suffer from 50-50 hindsight, right? So we look back and we know what the outcome was, and we remember the events as far more preordained than they were. But I love that call to action, that live in the moment and experience life as it's happening to you, and the future will look after itself if you look after the present. So,
yeah, exactly.
So the other thing I wanted to dig into just a little bit more deeply was to go back to this question of how can we do things in terms of diversity. So when you reflect on successes that you've seen, whether it's in politics or in business, whether campaigning in any sense, what is it that is successful in delivering change, and is there anything that you'd encourage people to avoid?
Well, I think that the companies that have been most successful that I've seen have been deliberate about it, or the campaigns that have been most successful have been deliberate about it. At one point we said we wanted to have at least a third of our candidates to be women. Well, that meant that you had a target and a goal that you had to work towards. And so you had to go out and find those qualified people to do that. And so, with companies, if it's your governance structure, then, it's about, I don't want to say it's about quotas, but it's about, okay, we want to be more diverse. Let's make it a point of finding people. And if we don't have the contacts to do that, then who has those contacts that can introduce us to the people who are, ably qualified and who are going to add value to our team? In terms of C-suite and that, it's about looking at your succession plan, right? Like, who is here that we can actually make sure that we're investing in and bringing forward? Who has, the potential that just needs actually more opportunity or more skills, and really having that 360. And then the other thing that we work with companies on as well is, what barriers are in your organization that you don't actually even recognize that, might hurt female retention, for example, right? Or might not allow for progression for more diverse people, or for other people as well. Like, it doesn't always necessarily have to come down to diversity. If you have a strong succession plan, you're going to have great people of all genders, of all different people of color, that coming forward and moving up in the ranks, and it's going to be good for your company. You just have to, in my opinion, make that a target for yourselves, and you have to be intentional about it. Because if it's just a sideline, yeah, that would be nice to have, whatever, you're never gonna actually achieve it. You have to put the resources behind something to allow it to flourish.
That's really helpful. I think I like to say, hope is not a strategy. Problem description is not a strategy.
That's right.
Be intentional about what the outcome is that you'd like to achieve, and that will clear the way for your brain to come up with all of the ideas and pathways that could possibly lead to that very tangible and very concrete outcome that you were saying is success. So exactly. I love that. Be intentional, be concrete, be data-driven, be aware of your blind spots, but be confident you can build a path to a better future. Now, George has a question in the chat that I love, but I'll just pre-see it. a little bit. He's talking about the future of work and saying, I love the idea that the office is where we go to be creative. But what's going to happen in the competition for resources? So when we think about smaller tech companies, maybe one of the ways they could compete with the bigger tech companies is in the flexibility they could offer for their workers. How do you think that's going to play out in terms of competition for resources? And certainly in BC, we've got some major players, and we also have plenty of small tech companies. How do you think that those dynamics are going to play out, Michele?
Well, I think it really remains to be seen. To be not to deflect the question, but with smaller teams, you can define flexibility in a different way, right? And so, again, it's about kind of almost surveying how do your people want to work? What does work look like for them? And is there a commonality that you as a company can draw and still be effective, right? And still kind of get the job done and have the interactions that you have. I think that that the interface of different tech startups with each other and with the community is so important, and everyone on this call probably knows that even better than I do. But I don't think that those kinds of opportunities will go away. I think that they might just become more important in terms of when they actually happen. And I think that some people might want to work Saturday. Whatever is, it kind of works with the team, and it just might be different kinds of hours. And but again, I think it starts with everyone that's working for you and with you to carve that path together.
And I would just say, by way of encouragement, the thing that motivates workers the most is actually not pay and compensation and benefits, it's purpose.
That's right.
It's a sense of building something together with the team that you believe is truly going to improve the world. And there are plenty of small companies that offer a really front row seat towards being involved in the change you want to see in the world. So there's a place for every company of every size. And I always like to say, I love all my children equally.
That's right.
All my members I love equally. And there's definitely places for everyone and assets that small companies have that large companies don't always have. So good. Okay, do we have any more questions in the chat? Any questions from anyone wondering? Okay, then I am going to go back to one final question for me. And this one might be a little bit longer, but I always like to ask it, what words of advice would you leave people with? So words of advice or words of inspiration for those of us who've been with us today?
I would say that you have to believe in yourself. And if you do genuinely believe in yourself, then you're going to project that in terms of to who you work for, who you work with, who you're trying to get to invest in your company. Developing that sense of confidence, I think, is one of the most attractive things that a person can have in terms of being an employee or that. And, for what I'd like to say to women as well is, don't be afraid to stand up for yourself. And, I think that, and again, a lot of this is generalizations, but I recognize it in myself. And, I have a fairly aggressive approach to a lot of what I do, but I like to have a harmonious environment, right? Like I like for people to get along, and you don't want to be necessarily disagreeable, and all of these kind of tropes that have been instilled in you as you've been kind of working through your career. But you can't let politeness stop you from being from standing up for yourself and for making sure that your worth is acknowledged, and that who you're working with, that they understand what kind of value that you expect, right? And also what I would say kind of along that line is think big, right? If you want to sit on a board of a major corporation, or if you want to create, an amazing widget that's going to revolutionize things, then don't let anyone tell you that you're not worthy or good enough for that, right? Like, there's plenty of people who are going to perhaps not push you along and trying to help you advance. But don't let that deter you. And I think that, the idea of looking for mentors and looking for people who maybe have a career path that is similar to what you want to do, or they've achieved a certain thing that you find interesting or that you might like to pursue. I think far more people are actually agreeable and willing to talk and kind of bring you through their journey. And so don't be afraid of not knowing what kind of path you would need to take to get to whatever goal you want to have. Look at the people who maybe have gone along that. Look at what their backgrounds are, and if you can, try and find connections along the way. I think the worst thing that anybody can do is set a limit upon themselves. And life's exciting, and possibilities are endless. And so why let anybody deter you?
Well, those are wonderful words to end on. Michele, I just want to say thanks again for agreeing to come on and share your wisdom and your career and what you're working on now. It's been a fantastic session, and I think we've all learned a lot. So thank you very much again.